Hey, let's talk about heads of state. As I alluded in my last playthrough video of it, I'm a lot less unhappy about my purchase of the game. I'm still disturbed about the fact that I don't think it handles theme terribly well. But there was, in terms of being well linked, etc. But there was an interesting story going on in it. Let me just read what the back blurb says, though. Players take on the roles of influential families and royal dynasties seeking power in Britain, France, Spain, blah, blah. Counts roles with dukes, marquis, princes, attempt to amass gold, troops, castles. These are the cards you're drawing. I mean, you're not... Okay, I would never have bought the game if it said players draw cards and try to match them to become to create new nobles. If it explained what the game was very clearly and the mechanism, no way in hell. Totally different from if I open up one of these war games back here and I look on the back. That's the mechanism I want. It keeps going, help from the church and from troops. Again, those are just those cards. I mean, they're hardly there. Will be essential in such a Machiavellian world where treachery abounds as players' nobles must run the gauntlet of assassination attempts. Well, that's there at least. The gallows and the axeman. I don't mind that too much. I feel like that's a key element of the game that kind of fits in. Abstracted as hell. Not even the king is safe. The player who controls the most nobles and the best dominates the provinces and courts of Europe at the end of 3 centuries will win the race. For the most heads of state and be crowned victor. Okay. Yeah, that doesn't sound like you're going to play cards and try to match things and try to build sets that you can reach victory points basis on. I should have known, though. It comes with lots of wooden blocks, right? Games with wooden blocks aren't usually very good on trying to simulate it. Okay, but still, I had a good time playing it. And let's take a look at some of the things in the components to begin with, because it's very hard for me to disseminate, to disassemble my feelings of why I enjoyed it. It may just be my mood. Lots of wooden blocks. Not as good as cardboard chits for me, but I'll live, right? Many of them not terribly useful. They're just counters that are stocked up somewhere to keep track of your victory points. A good record at the end. The cardboard chits. Big problem with these guys. At least for my poor little brain. I had real trouble telling some of them apart because of the border coloring, the colors on the board, etc. I got very distracted by the choice of how these are printed. Probably wouldn't happen if I was playing just one power against other people. I would probably know what my stuff is, and I wouldn't attack it. But I don't know if I'd know whose stuff another piece was. They don't express who owns them very well to me. Even though if I look at them, it seems pretty clear, especially the backs. The cards, nicely shuffleable, a little, they seem pretty decent to me, actually. And I found them completely functional, unlike the counters or the blocks. Horrible idea. I know a couple of games came up with mechanisms where you put blocks in a bag and pull them out to resolve things. In this game, it's just dumb. Give me a 4-sided die. These guys, they're okay. A little too big to just be an information reference. I think the same information could have been printed on one of their cards. And a little too flimsy or too stiff to keep the counters on the way I did. Just as a warning, they don't pour off well into a bag or whatever. You can't bend it, and it's not quite stiff enough that you could just pour them comfortably without a little bit of flop. The board is pretty nice, actually. I liked the board. I think it's pretty much needless. I mean, you could play this all on these kind of things. There's no connectivity. There's no importance. There's a racetrack that is the game, and then a lot of card stock and board and whatever put into something that I don't know. It didn't have to be printed this heavily. You're probably paying a premium for it because of the components when it might be a better game if it were smaller, I mean, this isn't something you can bring and play at a coffee house. Time length, it felt like something you could play in a couple hours pretty easily. Now, why did I enjoy this? That's the real question. It has a nice fast pace to it. I don't think there would be a lot of sitting there trying to figure out, oh, what can I do? There was a little bit at the beginning where I'd look at trying to get used to what things cost, etc. But you get pretty used to that. You look at your cards, what do you have is the key issue. And then maybe what's out on the table can I grab, or what do I need to fill my hand? You usually figure your target out pretty quickly. If you can't get it, then you got to start maybe juggling and looking around the board for something you can get. The rolls. Oh boy. The rules are nice. The rules, at first I had a bad impression on them, but yeah. Something I brought up before. Summary of play covers most of it. The important rules, this actually is covered in the summary of play as well. There's 10 pages of full color, not complete confusion, but just not in the best way of explaining what the game is. So for one thing, here, idea of play. It's talking still about that crap on the back of the box. That's got nothing to do with this game, man. I mean, it really doesn't. When we get to the course of play, here it's starting to give you, some idea of what's going on, but it's just not worded in a way to really hammer home what the game is about. Keep the rules simple, logical, legalistic, as perfect as possible, so that there's no misinterpretations. There's a couple of places where there's ambiguities, or they were pretty easily cleared up. But and then there's this horrible gloss that just gives you a headache trying to read it. But that's just me. Yeah, the rules were horrible. But what did I like about it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. It's really hard to tell you why you might like this game. Because I took a certain enjoyment in it, and maybe you just have to try to watch my playing to get some idea. But the kinds of decisions you were making were appealing. Do you want to buy this? Early on, I also liked the way the game flowed in terms of, and I mentioned this in one of them, in terms of very early, you just go out, grab stuff. It's all there, it's all yours. And then as the game progresses, you begin to have to play a very different type of game. And you're more aware of the other players and of your goals and how to target, that you have to actually target and take a lot of effort. Because it takes a lot of effort to take something at that point. Early on, it's very easy to just sort of say, okay, what's the best thing I can get right now? What's the best thing I can get right now? Later, it becomes much more of a balancing act because their score is more developed, and you've got kind of this real, I can't just throw down a couple cards and grab a noble. I've got to get rid of a noble, and I've got to plan if that's going to be someone in the capital, because I need to draw at least 2 cards from the treachery deck to do that. And even if it's not from the capital, if it's more than a baron or a count, I'm not going to have the number of cards in hand to do it, so I probably have to draw cards from the pile. But then I'm not going to have a treachery card to do it. So I can't just, kind of do an easy hit on someone. Very earliest part of the game, the first turn where people have a handicap as to how many cards they have, and they have no leftover cards in their hand to play with. They're also at this kind of limited step, but it's pretty easy to see. So the question there is, do you hold cards developing a better hand, or do you score some early points? And I'm not sure which one is better. The guy who went after nothing but early points ended up coming way in last for whatever reason. And I still don't have that completely figured out. But yeah, I feel like the decision making is fairly quick. I feel like the story that it portrays of these big noble families spread across Europe actually kind of almost works. It doesn't have to really fit in well with the theme. The effect of the gameplay manages, even though it's not tied to the theme, manages to generate a story that's very much in alignment with what kind of, at least my thoughts are about what is happening here. You have these noble families spreading out, becoming kind of intertwined into all the different provinces, into all the different titles. And then it becomes this struggle that's much more key over, first of all, you're not usually struggling over the minor titles anymore. You're going after the big ones because they're the ones that swing a country. And when you have to take a turn off to draw a treachery card, it might as well be for something really valuable. You've upped the price of any card of any space you go for. So going after one of those cheap spaces doesn't seem like a great idea. Now it happens. It happens a lot because you're sitting there and you say, if I can just draw a random this, all I need is a gold and then I can take a king out. Or all I need is the right treachery card and then I can do this. Well, when you're doing that and you're drawing for one card and you don't get it, you might have a few extra cards and you can pull off, knock off a baron here or something. And that's kind of cool too, because there's these opportunity actions that come from your plans didn't come out right. I also like the random ending. It's not very random, but you can never be sure when the points are going to happen. It's hard to calculate when a victory is going to happen. You can keep doing things, but in a lot of games like this, things like History of the World, not at all like this, but it's got the same kind of racetrack thing, right? It's a Euro. In a lot of games where you have this kind of cumulative point score over the game, you're able to look at it and say, if I do X, Y, and Z, I will win, and if I get these rolls and whatever. And in this, I don't think you can say that because you don't know how many turns there are going to be at the end. Until the very last card. If you're sitting there and the last card is on the pile, you know how to end the game, right? But the chances of that are very low, and everybody else has had a lot of cool decisions to make. I'm comparing this in my head to something that I don't have up here called Cattlemen. It's an old, I think, Parker Brothers game. One of these family-style games that, in terms of the link to, how well it's a simulation as to how well it tells a story and the mechanisms involved and everything, I think this ranks about equal to that Parker Brothers game. It's kind of like a Monopoly type game would, you have an expectation when you pick up a game. And when I pick up, an old Parker Brothers game and it gives me this kind of good experience, I think, wow, that's really cool. When I pick this up, not that the experience was at all bad, it's a much harder sell when I open it up and see, wow, this is not the mechanism that I'd expect for this kind of game, right? And I'm beginning to learn that Z-Man is not the company that a couple of games that I saw that they released would indicate to me. So I'm a little bit more hesitant now towards buying their games, just because of my tastes. I think in this case they came out with a game that I like, but I would have never bought had I known what it was. I mean, without playing it or something. Anyway, I guess that wraps it up for here. I'm gonna probably rate this around a 6 or a 7. It's a good enough game and everything, and I definitely will play. I can see playing it every now and then. I can see it being fun. I just there is that big disappointment sitting in there, and it's hard for me to rate it higher based on that. All right.